They laughed. That's the first thing I remember. When I told my family I couldn't afford college, they didn't offer help, encouragement, or even sympathy. They laughed. To them, my struggle was a joke, proof that I wasn't capable, that I'd never make something of myself. They used my failure as entertainment. What they didn't know was that their laughter would become my fuel. 10 years later, I stood in front of them, silent, while I paid their bills without saying a single word. Sometimes revenge doesn't need noise, it just needs success. I grew up in a family that believed appearances mattered more than compassion. My siblings, cousins, and even my parents loved comparing achievements. When I graduated high school, the next step for most kids was obvious: college. But for me, money was the biggest obstacle. I worked part-time jobs, but tuition was far out of reach. When I confessed that I couldn't afford it, I expected at least a little empathy. Instead, the room filled with laughter. My parents smirked, my siblings cracked jokes, and my uncle said, "Guess you'll be the family dropout." Every holiday gathering became a stage where they'd mock me. Still flipping burgers, they'd tease. "Maybe you should have studied harder." The sting wasn't just in their words, it was in how they dismissed my efforts, as if my struggle wasn't worth taking seriously. What hurt most was that my own parents joined in instead of standing up for me. That day, I made a decision. If no one was going to support me, I'd support myself. And one day, I'd show them what real success looked like. But not with words, only actions. The path forward wasn't glamorous. While my cousins packed their bags for college dorms, I was working double shifts at a diner. Every penny I made went toward survival and savings. At first, it felt hopeless. $10 an hour barely covered rent, let alone dreams. But I refused to stay stuck. I started teaching myself skills online. Late nights that could have been wasted in bitterness, I spent learning digital marketing, coding, and freelancing. Slowly, opportunities opened. I picked up small clients, then bigger ones. Before long, I was making more in a week freelancing than I had in a month at the diner. The grind was exhausting, but it gave me something my family didn't: independence. While they laughed at my so-called failure, I was quietly stacking experience, skills, and money. I didn't post about it on social media. I didn't announce anything. I let them believe I was still struggling. By year 5, I had scaled my freelancing into a full-fledged business. By year 7, I was earning more annually than my entire family combined. And by year 10, I owned property, had investments, and no debt. The irony? My college-educated relatives were drowning in loans and barely keeping up with bills. 10 years later, the family gatherings felt different. When I showed up, dressed sharply, driving a car I bought in cash, there was silence. No more jokes, no more smug comments. Instead, I noticed something else: desperation. My parents, once so proud, were facing financial hardship. Medical bills piled up, credit card debt grew, and their retirement savings had vanished. My siblings, who once mocked my dead-end jobs, were struggling too. One was unemployed, another was living paycheck to paycheck, and both were drowning in student loan debt. When conversations turned to money, they spoke with bitterness, resentment, and sometimes tears. The very people who had laughed at me now had nothing left to laugh about. Then came the moment that changed everything. My parents received a stack of overdue bills: electricity, water, medical expenses. They sat at the table, defeated, whispering about which utility they'd have to let go. Without a word, I reached into my bag, pulled out my checkbook, and started writing. The room went silent. Every eye watched as I signed each check. No one dared to speak. I slid the bills back across the table, fully paid. And then, I leaned back and said nothing. The revenge wasn't in the money, it was in their realization that I had succeeded without them. In that moment, I realized something important. Revenge isn't always loud, angry, or dramatic. Sometimes, it's silent. Sometimes, it's letting your success echo louder than any insult ever could. They wanted me to beg. They wanted me to need them. Instead, they needed me. The laughter that once fueled me was gone, replaced with awkward silence and shame. My siblings avoided eye contact. My parents mumbled half-hearted thank yous. No one dared to make a joke at my expense. I had become the very person they said I couldn't be, self-made, strong, and capable. I didn't rub it in. I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't need to. The truth was written across their faces. They knew exactly what they had done all those years ago, and they knew how wrong they had been. As I left that night, I felt lighter. Not because I had humiliated them, but because I had proven to myself that I was more than their expectations. Their mockery no longer mattered. What mattered was that I had risen above it all. And the sweetest part? They would never forget that silence. Sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting, fighting, or even proving someone wrong with words. It's living so well that your very existence becomes proof enough. My family's laughter once crushed me, but in the end, it became the fire that built me. 10 years later, I didn't just pay their bills, I paid back every insult, every smirk, every doubt with quiet success. If you're ever underestimated, remember this: silence can be louder than words, and revenge is best served by living the life they swore you never could.